Hi, everyone joining us live. So the first part, I won't spend too much time, but the first few pages are about the cross. And guys, like the cross is something I grew up like learning just so much about, and I think there's so much value to like studying it, to really going into depth of like what did Jesus do and like what was really the price that he paid. I think it does something like in our hearts as we like look at like that's what you did. And then I think as we sit in the room and we get to know more of who he is, and it's like you're that person and you came down and you did this like for me. I think there's like this like cycle, and then it's like now I have to give you everything because like of who you are. So I'll run through this super quick. But I do super encourage you guys to like take this into the prayer room and really read each point and go through it. Because yeah, again, I think it's just super powerful. Take some communion with you and just like sit and just dwell in it. Go through this different scriptures, just all this stuff. I think it's just super powerful. I'll start off with the first verse at the top, Hebrews 10:5-7. So when Jesus the Messiah came into the world, he said, "Since your ultimate desire was not another animal sacrifice, you have clothed me with a body that I might offer myself instead. Multiple burnt offerings and sin offerings cannot satisfy your justice. So I said to you, God, I will be the one to go and do your will and fulfill all that is written of me in your word." Just sit with that for like forever. That verse, that's the Passion Translation, but New King James also says pretty much the same thing, but it's just like sitting with the dwelling of like, what is your justice that like all of these things that can't satisfy it? Okay, and then the rest of it goes into the 7 bloodsheds of Jesus. So in the entirety of like Jesus dying for us, he shed his blood 7 times, and each bloodshed was to overcome a specific area in our lives. And it, as we like read through it, it's so strategic. Like seriously, like just looking at it, it's like the Lord and his plan, and just seeing how perfect he went, like how perfect he planned the cross to be able to cover every single area of our life. And there's pretty much nothing we go through that we can't find an area he shed his blood for. And he like, I think what blows my mind is like he allowed everything to happen to him. So nothing was like a human's like idea. It wasn't like one of the Roman soldiers like, this is such a great idea, let's make like a crown of thorns. Jesus like, yeah, that's cute, I knew that, like I did that on purpose. Like God gave those ideas to them so that he can cover each area for us. So super quick, I'll go through them. Of the 7 bloodsheds. So the first one, he shed his blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. That is to cover the fight between flesh and spirit. So as he's battling, like going to the cross and enduring everything and all the pain versus the Father's will, and he shed his blood there for the first time. The second time he was beaten, he went and they beat him with a whip. That is to cover any sickness, so it's for our healing. The third time was for the crown of thorns, pushed it into his temple, and that is to cover curses, just the power over curses. The fourth one, his face was beaten and he was bleeding because they hit him so much, and that is to cover identity. So it's to give us identity in him in the cross, and it's also to be able to know his identity for us so that we have like the direct access to know who he is. The fifth one, his hands were pierced. That is to give us victory over sin. The sixth one, his feet were pierced, which was to give us the authority over the enemy, just fully. If we'll jump to it later, but Jesus says, like, all this authority I give to you, like to trample over like scorpions and serpents and over everything of the enemy. Like he gave us that full power. And then the 7th time, his side was pierced and blood and water gushed out, which is for emotional healing. So it's his blood and then the living water of the Holy Spirit come together for emotional healing. I know I went through that so fast and that was so many things. So that's why I'm telling you guys, like, just take some time and go through these notes and read each scriptures and all this stuff, looking into like the specific things of exactly what he went through and what that covers and the power there. But we will jump to page 4, if you guys want to go there with me. And we'll go to point 10, God's heart revealed in the cross. So like I said before, like looking at Jesus and who he is, and then the cross is like the full picture of God's humility, like put on display. Is like, you left everything. You're the most worthy man, and you came down, you died for sinners that like aren't perfect and never will be, And it's just like his desire for us is so seen that he didn't just go after like one area. Like it wasn't just to cover sin, to make us clean enough so we can like serve him. He covered everything we could ever need so that we can be fully whole, fully healed, fully free. All just for what? Just for us to be with him. Like there's no like ulterior motive of like, oh, like let's get them good enough so that they can build a good enough ministry to get my name really known. It's like, no, I just want them, and I want to heal their pain, and I want them to be able to walk in like full freedom. John 3:16. I mean, I know that's like one of the most talked about verses, like known verses, but I think that sometimes we kind of skip over it because of that. But sitting and dwelling in that, like he loved the world so much that he gave his son so that we could be with him forever. Point B, we cannot add to the blood. He's covered everything, and there's nothing we can do to make it more powerful. What I love about Jesus is like, he's like, I got everything covered. He's like, all you have to do is just come and receive it. And he loved us before we loved him, or before we were like saved or free or anything. And it's in that place of like, we can't even earn being saved. I think sometimes now that like, once we're walking with Jesus, we're like, let me do all these things so that like I could be worth dying for. And he's like, I already found you worthy. Like in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he was there, he already found us worthy to die for. And sometimes there's like this tension of like, but I want to be perfect so that like I'm like worth dying for. And he's, yeah. I don't have much to say on that, but that's just it, is that sometimes when we think like, oh, okay, like now I'm better than other people, so like I don't really need the blood as much, or like I don't really like, I deserve it now because I've given you this many years, so now I deserve your mercy, or I deserve your communion. There's a deep power in remembrance and taking the time to remember what Jesus has done in the cross and in our own personal testimonies. I think when we look through the Bible, we see like with David, when Samuel was like, remember David and his promises. When Israel tells God, like, remember your promises you made to our father. Or God says, remember the promises I made to your fathers before you. There's something with the, like, when we think about what he's done, it's almost like this, everything clicks like, oh yeah, you're worth everything. Like you're worth everything you ask for, and you're worth everything I give you, because like, look at what you've done. Look at how merciful and forgiving and kind you are. Revelation 12:11 says, they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. There's something about that combination of like taking the power of like the blood and then what he's done both in the cross, but also in our own personal lives, our own personal testimonies. And it lets us join into his heart. Like, and I think it shows just everything about him. Like, you're the most perfect king, judge, bridegroom, and you left all glory to just do what? To die for us, just so that we can join in with you. It's like, I think it like realigns our hearts again. Sometimes when we start to like have unbelief or doubts, or something's like hard to give up to Jesus, it's like, oh wait, like it's like this reality check, like, no, like you're beautiful and you're worth everything you ask for. Something a few years ago, one of my spiritual leaders told me, and I'll never forget it, I think about it all the time, is like, look at where you used to be a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and where you are now. And like, how did God get you here? And he never violated your will. and all you see is like his goodness. He never forced things on you. He was never not kind and patient and compassionate and like forgiving. And it's like, who are you? Like, how did you do that? And I love looking back at those times, and looking back at like a year ago, I was a completely different person. And it's like, and I'm only here, and everything that I have and I am is only because God got me here, kindly and gently, and just with being with him. So take communion, it's really powerful. There was like a season in my life when God asked me to take communion every morning with him. And you guys, seriously, like, recommend it. You can buy them on Amazon. I'll send you the link. But it's like so powerful to just start your day with like, you broke your body for me, and you spilled your blood so many times. And then you give me all of that power and authority. And then it's like, and then you walk throughout your day, and different attacks come, or thoughts, or like the enemy tries to attack you, and you're just like, you're a joke. Like, do you know who Jesus is and all the authority that he's given us, So super recommend taking communion often. And I think just slowing down and remembering like, what has Jesus brought us out of and unto, it's just like slowing that down and just giving him that pause in our day or a week. Any questions so far? I feel like I said a lot. Cool. We'll go to page 5, point 12, the beauty of Jesus. All right, let's get into it. Point 8, Jesus has enough to satisfy us for an eternity. We will not grow tired of beholding his beauty as long as we keep our eyes fixed on him. I think I heard this always, like, growing up. Oh yeah, Jesus has enough like for a lifetime. And I was like, yeah, cool. But then I think the more we sit with him, we're like, no, like, you actually have enough beauty, and we've only scratched, like, I wouldn't even know if it's called the surface yet. Like, it's like just the smallest top layer. And the more like we sit and spend time with him, it's like, no, you really do. Like, that's not just something we say and we hear a lot here. Like, he really has enough beauty for us to spend our lifetime with him and never get bored. And still, even then, when we meet him, we won't really know him like in the depth of how much we can. But then, like, at the same time, he lets us come as close as we want. No limit. He's like, as much as you want, you have. And it's like, what? Like, it's all left up to us. He's like, full access, chase after it, like, in your capacity kind of thing. Point B, at the end of ages, we won't be fascinated by end times, by tribulations, or all the events that happened as the scripture said they would. Like, at the end of everything, end times, when Jesus comes back, we're not going to be like, man, that was crazy. Like, we really got persecuted the way we were, like, it said it was, and like these things happened, and like this happened. Like, that's not what we're going to spend eternity fascinated by. We're just everything is going to be fixed on the Lamb. Like, all attention, all gazes would be looking at one man. And sometimes I think like we'll start focusing and getting fascinated by these other things, but all of end times is all about Jesus. Okay, I'm not going to start talking about end times, but we'll talk about it in a few weeks. But the point is just that Jesus, like, we'll spend eternity fascinated by him. We'll spend our life here and on the other side of it, and it'll still take us an eternity, and we will never grow tired of his beauty. And I think when we think about that, like, if we really comprehended, like, how much do you have that we can spend all of that time and we're still fascinated, we don't grow bored of you. Like, you have so much, there's all these new things. And then not only new things, we get to look back at the things you already did and still be fascinated by that, of our own testimonies and what you've done. It's like this whole thing of like, you're just enough. Like, you're enough for us. And it's not this cliche thing of like, oh yeah, you satisfy us. No, you really satisfy us. If we keep our gaze fixed on you, you really satisfy everything we need. And then when we look at the cross, it's like, and we can find everything we need in your sacrifice too. It's like he's just fully covered everything. And he's like, balls in your court. Like, you can have, which all just goes around to show more of his character. Point C, shapes the way we walk out our lives. And the more we look at him and what we think of him is what we in turn become. So if we see God as like, actually, I'm not going to say an example. Just everything we think, how we think of God shapes the way that we act towards him. It shapes what we give to him. It shapes even us sitting in the room. How do you act? Like, are you really trying to earn something? Like, are you trying to justify your salvation? Or are you just like fascinated? It's all based on like, how do you view him? How do you know him? How do you know him as a father? How do you know him as a son? How do you know him as the Spirit? And those things, like, they'll influence even how we pray, how we worship, how we live our lives, how we make different decisions in our life, all around that. And the more we sit and behold him, lets him just rip open the boxes and come as he is. And I love that fact that we have a place here to just give him full permission. Like, just go. Like, we don't know exactly how you'll come always, but you are so open to come the way that you are. Point D, our reactions and responses in times of trouble and testing reveal how worthy and good we really think he is. And it's in the times that he does things not like we would. And in those times, can we really believe his goodness is enough and he's all that he says he is? The wilderness seasons, it's in times of really hard, like, tragedies or just really hard seasons in our life, emotionally, circumstance-wise, that it really reveals our heart. How worthy do we really think you are? And it's in those times that, like, when those things aren't good, can you still show up and sit with him and give him what he's worthy of? When you don't really see the worth, if that makes sense, or we don't see his goodness in the tangible way. And a lot of times our responses in those times is we get a little offended with God. Like, why didn't you show up this way? Why didn't you say this? Why didn't you save this family member? Why didn't you heal this person? Why didn't you resurrect this person? And all in all, okay, guys, this isn't coming out harsh, I promise, but all in all, it's because there's something in our flesh since the fall that wants to be God. And it's those times that we get offended because that's not how we would have done it if we were God. So when he doesn't show up, like, let's say, like, he doesn't save a family member of ours, right? What happens if they pass away and they don't get saved? Well, we're like, well, why didn't you save them? Because if I was God, I would have saved them. And it's in those times when it just shows, like, how we really, like, how much control and how much of God's goodness do we really believe in. And it's those times, like, that's the real wrestle of our hearts. And that's when all of this, everything that we spend these hours cultivating, get put to the test. Like, do we really think he's worth it? And can we sit and stay with him? I love what Susanna shared on Wednesday. We're not gonna start crying about it, but it was so good, because it's like, well, what happens when God doesn't heal your daughter? It's not like he can't, but and then it's like, well, there was two options. She could have gotten offended so mad because it's not like God can't do it. And then it's like, so can you stay even when he doesn't do what you want him to do? Point E, in the first time God reveals himself to Moses in the burning bush, he says, I am, or I am who I am. But another way it's translated in different times is, whatever I am, I will be. I love that, because it's so, like, perfect of God. Like, whatever he says he is, he will be that. And there's, like, we could see his faithfulness in that. But there's also those times that, but what happens when God's merciful the way that he says he is, when we think you should be judging them? Or what about when he judges someone, but we think you should have been merciful? It's like when we see his character play out in his own, like plan, the way that he chose to do it. And then we're like, wait, what happens when he shows mercy to our enemies? And what happens when he heals someone that we hate or something? Like, when he's God, when he is God and he stays that and he is who he says he is. But that we're like, but what? Like, what happens? This is a fun one. Like, what happens in end times when the people that were persecuting Christians, God saves them, shows mercy, and makes them the highest in the kingdom? Like, how hard is that to wrestle with? You know, of like, well, don't you know what they did? Like, don't you know what I've done? I've spent my life, you know, like sitting with you and giving this to you. Don't you know who they are? A little bit of Pharisee talk there, right? Because it's like, it's this thing in us that like we want God to come the way that we want him to come. And when he completely blows the other way, it's like, where can he find us in those times? Like still sitting with him and wrestling with him, or are those the times that we're like, peace out? I don't like, this isn't how I would have done it. Which moves me on to my next point, the room for mystery. I think sometimes we just need to let God be God and understand that we won't know everything and we won't understand him fully. And that's super hard to like grasp with, because I want to know everything. I want to like, I love learning, and I was like, just tell me everything and tell me exactly how you'll do it and tell me exactly who you are. And he's like, no, like there's going to be things that we don't understand. And it's those times, like for instance, with Susanna and her daughter, like there's not everything. We don't see how everything played out. And we don't know the other factors that were contributing to it, you know, but God sees everything. And it's sometimes those times when, especially I think with like sickness and death, where it's sometimes like, I don't understand it all, but that's okay. I know you're good. And I know that if that's how it happened, that meant it was good because that's how you did it. And that's so hard, you guys, that's so hard to wrestle with. I know. And it's even in my own life, sometimes I'm like, dang it, why did this happen in my life? Why did you let that happen? And for years, I won't see his goodness in it. And then in like 5 years, I'll look back and be like, oh my God, you're so perfect. You're the most perfect being. You did it. Like, that's exactly what I needed to go through to get me to this place and this place and this place, to all lead me back to you. And I think sometimes we get a little scared with wrestling with the Lord about things. Like sometimes it's like, can I even ask you this? Like, are you gonna like burn me up, you know, for like questioning you? But I think that the Lord's not as scared of honesty as we are. He's like, dude, let me tell you why this happened. Let me tell you this. Let me share my heart with you. And he delights in sharing these things. And sometimes we won't understand, and we just have to cling to his character and just know like, okay, like I don't get that, but that's okay. Like you'll still find me with you, and you'll still find me there, and I'll wrestle with you about it, and I'll let the tension sit there, and I'll cry and I'll mourn with you, and I'll just know that you're good. Like you just are. And the more that we sit with him, the more we realize we don't really know him. And that just opens up the door for like, just let there be mystery, you know, let there be some things that are just unknown. And I think that really prepares us for end times, when things happen the way that we've never seen before. Like when things happen that are unknown to us, it's just clinging that this is your character. This is what you've said about yourself. That's all I know right now. And I'm just going to cling to that. Also on the other side of mystery, there's this thing that like, there's sometimes that it almost looks like God's character contradicts itself. So for instance, like, you know, in the Old Testament, especially, I think it's like, well, you say you're gentle and lowly, but then you killed an entire city. It's like, well, I don't think you gently were like, come here, like, you know, like you're gonna die, you know. It's like, it's like there's like this wrestle, or like, or even when Jesus comes back at end times with the wicked, he's not gonna be like, all right, come here, like you're gonna die, you know, like you were wicked. It's not gonna be like that. Like there's an anger and a wrath to the Lord, and sometimes that contradicts things we know. But this is an example I'll use. Miri and I are really close friends, right? And Miri, to a default, is very kind and gentle, right? But if I walked in one time and I saw Miri just screaming at Josh, just yelling, I'd be like, that's not Miri. Like, that's a clone. I wouldn't be like that. I think that there's that part of me that's like, okay, I've never seen this side of you. I don't know it. But I know that if you're yelling at Josh, there has to be a reason. There's things that built up in you because, come on, Josh. because you're not always screaming and yelling and mad. So there's things that build up in you. And just because I've never seen that part of Miri, I've never seen her scream like that before, it doesn't mean it's not her and it's not a part of her. It's not maybe her default thing. It's not her default personality, but it doesn't mean it's wrong or it's sinful. And I think in that same thing with the Lord, everything he feels perfectly. His emotions are never sinful. And the times that we see his anger come out, I think sometimes we try to like cover it up, like, okay, don't talk about it with people that don't believe, because like the bad side, like, oh, how do we justify that? How do we justify you like killing the armies that went against Israel simply because they were just against your people? Like there's different wrestling things that sometimes, like with having friends, especially that are non-believers, we kind of try to like, well, we don't really talk about that, because we can't really justify why was he like, what happened with his anger and his wrath. Like even there's New Testament stuff too. Like there's that couple that went and they literally got killed because they lied about their offering. Like what was that? And like, or like when they were carrying the tabernacle and when it fell and the guy like caught it, he died. Like, well, he was trying to do a good thing. There's these things that sometimes I think we kind of tend to like, I don't know about that one, so we'll just, But God's not embarrassed about anything he's done. He's not trying to hide it and just be like, okay, guys, like, that was a mistake. Oops, like, oops, like my anger, like, got out of the way. He's like, no, I felt that holy. I'm not sinning in my anger. And there's sometimes things that, like, it says that God's slow to anger, but it's not that he never gets angry. So it's sitting even in that of like, well, what happened in you? What built up your anger to action? Like it's sitting with this thing of like we can know him, and there's things that are mystery, sure, but then there's other things that sometimes even in that contradiction, like we get to know him more. And I think all of this, like just pursuing knowing him fully and rightly, is all leading on to preparing us for end times, because when we see him in ways we are seeing the wrath of God. I've to a default, I've pretty much seen mercy and forgiveness and compassion, but that doesn't mean that there's not these other parts of the scripture that are there. I've never seen it. And I if I saw it, I'd go, whoa, like, what just happened? But it's like that knowing of the Lord that'll help us in those times to be like, okay, I've never seen that about you, but help me understand your heart there. Like, tell me about your thoughts during that time. Tell me, like, what were you thinking in this Bible story here? Like, what was happening in you? Yeah, and all of that, again, like it helps us to know that like he can come the way that he is and not the way we prefer it or not the way we've seen. And it's like my heart's prayer this last month has just been like, don't come how I'm used to you coming. I don't want to justify or reason away, like when you come in a way I've never seen. I don't want to be like, oh, maybe that wasn't God, or maybe that was this, maybe that person was faking. I just want to be like, was that you? That was so beautiful. Like, I want to know you in that way. And just being like, don't just come like how I'm used to you. Like, I want to know new things of you. I want to know new encounters. And as we even pray in the end times for like the biggest outbreak of the Spirit, well, that's a new outbreak. It's things we've never seen before. And sometimes we'll pray like, yeah, come like we've never seen. But are our hearts prepared for him to come like we've never seen before? Can he come and we won't be like, oh yeah, that wasn't God? Because I've never seen it like that. It's like, can we be so in character and being like, yeah, that very well could have been you. We don't control how the Holy Spirit operates. And it's like this thing of, I'm like, just like come the way that you are. I want to wrestle with you. I want to wrestle with the things I don't understand. I want to wrestle with like, how are you Alpha and Omega? What does that even mean? Like, how are you both? How do you do that? How are you kind and compassionate? But then there's things that make you angry and that push you to certain things. And it's like there's just this like like that thing in me to just be like, I just have to know you. I want to know you. I want to wrestle with you. I want to behold you, like whatever it costs. I want my heart to be fully open to you so that I'm not offended with you when I see things I've never seen before. I don't want to like justify you away and like just be like, maybe not. Like I want you to be able to come even in this house, like come in ways we've never seen, and we'll be like, yes, it's you. And we'll get to, and that takes us into a bigger depth in him. That's how we get to know more and more of him. And he's like obviously so willing just to be like, yeah, I want to show you. Like the Holy Spirit is so like, yeah, like let me show you more. Let me show you things you've never seen before that all prepare us for when we're living with Jesus forever. Like let me show you beauties you've never seen before. And all these things. Okay. Oof. Point D. He's not a formula to be solved so that we never need him again. He allows us to move his heart and his hand and to change his mind with our pleas and our intercession. And he allows us to know him as close as we want. Let me go down a little rabbit trail real quick. There's this in the Hebrew language, especially with Moses, when he would plead to God, like he's God with Israel, like that's it. Like I'm so done. I'm gonna destroy this whole nation, restart. And Moses would plead with him, and the word that it says, then God doesn't need us at all, but he allows us to change his mind. He allows us to move his hand. He allows us to like sometimes pull back his hand, from his wrath. And he's a God that's interactive. He's not just like, this is my way. Everything is laid out for eternity. Kind of like if you ever seen Loki, like, the time, oh my God, what was it called? Anyways, the timeline, the sacred timeline. It's not like that. He's not like laid everything out. He's like, this is what's going to happen no matter what. He allows us to change things. He allows us to shift atmospheres, and he waits to release things till we come and ask him. Like he doesn't even need us. Sometimes I think about them like all of our intercessions that I'm like, you could do what we're asking like that. You wouldn't skip a beat, but you wait for us to come and fill the bowl, and then you're like, okay, now I'll do it. And it's kind of like, it just all kind of shows like what's his deepest desire. It's to have that like connection with us. It's to have that conversation. It's for us to come to him and he shares with us and we talk back with him. And it's this like looping conversation. It's not one-ended. He's not like a dictator God, that just like, it's like my way or no way. He allows us to be a part of like change and like, and everything that he does, he lets us be a part of the process. Okay, we'll flip the page to the last one. I feel like I keep going like this. Like I like go really high and I'm like, okay, cool, we'll move on. Okay, last point, worth of Jesus. How are we doing on time? Okay, pretty good. I'm proud of myself. Okay, worth of Jesus. I'll put a few things first. One thing that, first of all, worth of Jesus teaching at my internship is literally the reason I'm still here. I remember Zach taught it at the first internship, and it was because of the worth of Jesus. It like pierced me, like it was like God like wrote it on my heart, and it was those times that when really hard times came and when I'm not gonna be, I was like, tell me to leave anywhere, like just not here and in Sacramento. And it was those times I was, but I'll still show up because you're worth it. And one of my favorite kind of stories to go back to, especially when I'm like going through a lot and when it just kind of feels like everything that could go wrong is going wrong. And it's a lot of times in those times God's silent too. And I'm like, okay, like what's going on? In Daniel, the three men, who knows their name? Cool. Nice. Nice. So that story I always refer back to. All right, settle down, guys. All right. So it's so that story. I'll do a quick recap. Basically, they build an idol. The king's like, everybody bow to this. These three men are like, no, we're not going to bow to it. The king brings the three of them before him, and he's like, you need to bow or you're going in the furnace, like you're going to die. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but basically they say like, well, our God's strong enough to save us from the furnace. But even if he doesn't, we will not bow. That thing is like, because looking at the story, like we know the ending. They didn't know how it would end. And the thing is, God didn't come save them as they're walking in it. They were already in the furnace. They're like, that's it. Life is done. And that's when God decided to show up. And I love that story with circumstances, because a lot of times we think he's late, or it's like, don't you know I'm in the furnace? Like and sometimes we'll be like, don't you know where I am? Like, don't you know what I'm going through right now? Don't you know what the enemy's attacking me with? Like, where are you? But it's that thing of like, but even if God doesn't come, like we won't bow. And that, with the words of Jesus, that's what kept me for so long with the Lord just throughout my life, is like, even if you don't show up, I'm not bowing to sin. I'm not bowing to the enemy, and I'm not bowing to like different temptations. I'll wait you out. And if you don't show up, I'll meet you on the other side, kind of thing. And it's like, and that's when God showed up, you know, and it's that thing of like clinging to who God is, even to the point of death. And it's like, they didn't have much to depend on. All they knew is our God's powerful and he can save us from the furnace. And it's not like God was like, don't worry, I'll save you. Like they had no promises to lean on in that way. It wasn't like, don't worry guys, like I got you. All they were like, our God's powerful enough to save us. But even if he doesn't, like we're not bowing to this. And then God came and saved them when it felt like it was too late. And so a lot of times I feel like sometimes the enemy, it's almost like he puts so much pressure on our shoulders to kind of like get us to bow. But it's holding on to that, to like looking to Jesus, like clinging to him and being like, life sucks right now, but even if you don't show up, like I'm not bowing, I'll wait you out. But the cool thing is God shows up all the time, and we can wait him out and he'll come, even in times that sometimes it seems like it's too late, or it seems like it's not the way we wanted him to, and it's not like what we were asking of him, but he'll show up perfectly, because he showed up into the fire. They probably would have thought it'd be best to save them, maybe like supernaturally take them out of the furnace. He's like, no, I'll come stand in the furnace with you and I won't let you burn. And then from that place of them waiting and having that faith in God, then the king was like, everybody bowed to their God, because they were like, how did that happen? And there was, this like marvel at the Lord's work, but they could have so easily just, the story could have just been so different, and another thing is like, Old Testament, they didn't have the Holy Spirit. God wasn't constantly speaking in them that they could just cling to it at any time. And, like in different periods of time when God was silent for months, years, hundreds of years, what kept people with the Lord? I think sometimes God doesn't speak for a month and I'm like, okay, I'm out. Like, where are you? Like, are you even real? It's like, we're so quick with like our unbelief of like, all right, where are you? Like, you're not saying anything, then I'm out, or like, we just get so offended. Like, why aren't you saying anything? But sometimes I think that the Lord lets us, like he delays his response so that for a few things, I think it lets us cling to the truth of like, can we cling to the things he's already spoken to in the past? And can we cling to his character, who he is, knowing that he is good? Like, can we cling to his goodness? And then also it shows us how weak are we and how much do we need him. But it's in those times sometimes I'm like, God, I don't know if I would have survived Old Testament Christianity. That's difficult. I feel like I fall apart in like 1 second, and these people, some of them, like for years, hundreds of years, sometimes some of them their entire lifetime. They only had the past like prophetic word and then nothing else. They didn't have anything to cling on to. And it's like in those moments, sometimes can we wait out God? Sometimes I'll talk with the Lord and he'll talk to me about is like, if right now, as we are, however old you are, I'm 21, 21 years of my testimony with Jesus, everything he's done. If he never spoke a word again, can I go until the end with him? Can I show up to this room for 20 years? He doesn't say a word. I just have like the Bible. I have what he said, and I have what I've seen him do. Like sometimes I'm like, I don't think so. Because sometimes I'm like, I need you to do this and this and this and this. But it's like, it's realizing that God's worth everything, and he's worthy not because of what he does, but it's because of who he is. And it's in times of like testing and that we really get to see, like, we don't really believe that. Sometimes it's like, well, you need to do this and that, and I'll keep going. It's like, but if he did nothing ever again, he would remain just as worthy. He would still be the worthy king. He'd still be the worthy one coming back. He would still be worthy of his inheritance that he's going to get because it's of who he is. That's why, like, he's not worthy to open the scroll because he healed some people. He's worthy because of his character. He's already worthy of it. Point A, everything we give him is because he's worthy of it. Well, I kind of just said that. But I think just personally with me, if any of you relate to it, awesome. I think it might just be me. But sometimes, especially with giving the Lord years of our lives, especially when we're young, we kind of get this entitlement in our hearts of like, well, I gave you this. Aren't you going to give me what I'm asking for back? So for instance, like I've been here a year and a half, right? Let's say I'm here for 10 more years. I gave God 10 years of my life just sitting with him. And if he never saves some of my family members that aren't saved, like sometimes I'm like, well, I'm giving you this, like you kind of owe me, you know, like it's like, but what we give him, it's not because we can later cash it out and be like, well, remember I gave you this, so you like, you know, do this for me kind of thing. Or like, he's not alone in like, of like, okay, I'll give you 5 years. You give me 5 million, you know, like whatever it is. It's like, he's not transactional in that way. And sometimes our hearts, like we kind of feel the entitlement, even though maybe sometimes we don't admit it, but it's kind of seen when he says no, or when he doesn't do the things we want him to do, we get to see what's our heart posture. So I'm like, but I gave you this. He's like, okay, well, you know, we can't control him and he can't be manipulated. And what's really important to understand is like, where does the cycle start? It start like first. We give him what he's worthy of because of who he is, not we give him things because he'll give us things. And the things that he does, and because he's a loving father and he's compassionate and his heart's for us. And like, we have to remember that so that we don't feel that entitlement. We don't feel like he owes us anything because it all began with him first. He chose us first. He loved us first. He died for us first. Like he took the cross first. And that's why we do everything, is because like he's worthy of it. He's worthy for us to take our cross. He's worthy of us to give him love. He's worthy of us to give him the adoration and give him our lives and give him everything he asks for. Okay. All right, guys, I'm almost done. Sorry. So Matthew 7:21. This verse, these verses, honestly, I think is one of the scariest things in the Bible to me. I'll read about the Old Testament crazy stuff, but still this, to me, puts the fear of God in me every time I read it. I'll summarize kind of, but basically Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying, not everyone who comes to me and says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. And they'll come and say, like, but we prophesied in your name, we raised the dead, we healed the sick, we did these wonders. And he'll say, I never knew you because you didn't do my Father's will. That to me, like literally, I'm like, whoa, that is such a sobering verse. Because the thing is in our world, if we look at it, the people that have like a healing anointing or have an anointing to like raise the dead, we idolize them. We bring them to conferences, right? Just lay your hand on me, please. Like, you know, it's Archie. Oh my God. Okay, guys, don't idolize him, okay? Okay. No, don't idolize Archie. What's called, but like, you know, we idolize those things. To us, like, we're like, whoa, that person's like so anointed. That person's so like high up there, but we can get to heaven and God will be like, I don't know you. And all the things sometimes we place our value in are worthless to God, because he all looks at our heart. Because if your heart's not right, and if you're doing it for the wrong purposes, and especially if you're not doing the Father's will, you're focused on the wrong things, they're not going to be worth anything when we meet him. Like he'll just be like, I don't know you. And I love what Miri was sharing a few weeks ago about cultivating the oil. And the fact of it is at this point, it's too late. Like I can't take everything that I've done on the earth and be like, but look at the DAC board. Like I spent hours on that. Like I can't take like, well, look at this, like I can't take these things. Look at the YouTube thumbnails. Go look at them. Okay? Like go look at the YouTube thumbnails. I spent hours changing them. We can't take these things with us and justify why we're somehow good with God. We're either doing his will or we're not. And everything, if we're doing his will, it'll all be worth it. And if we're not, everything's worthless. And everything you waste your life on was a waste, because your heart wasn't in the right place. And again, like kind of like how Miriam was sharing, is like these people that God's talking about, they're not unbelievers, like wasting their life away on things that are sinful. These things aren't sin. Casting out demons, it's like of God. You do that with Jesus. And the same thing like with the 10 virgins, those weren't unbelievers. Yeah. They were preparing themselves for the bridegroom. And I think often we need to look at our lives and be like, am I still in your will? Am I doing what you're asking of me? Am I focused on the right things or the wrong things? Like show me, like reveal to me. You want to hear the words, well done, good and faithful servant, and not I never knew you. Our works here don't matter nearly as much as our heart and the things we do. Same thing, if we do things for the praise of men, same thing, we already got our reward. And God's kingdom is so like backwards, upside down, like his values are so different than the things we value. And it's in spending the time with him that we get to like reevaluate, are we in line with you? And if we don't give him that time, we'll just live our lives kind of just like, well, I hope I'm okay. But when we sit with him, it's almost like impossible to not get that revelation, because you're with him constantly. This quote by Dane Ortland: for all his glory and dazzling holiness, his supreme uniqueness and otherness, no one in human history has ever been more approachable than Jesus Christ. No prerequisites and no hoops to jump through. I said this a little bit earlier, but what we owe Jesus, we could never pay back in a lifetime. Like seriously, especially if you read everything he did on the cross, we owe him big time. And yet he doesn't demand anything. He doesn't force us to do anything. And I don't want that the first time I meet Jesus face to face is the first time he knows me and I know him. I want to know him now. And I love that everything that we'll read this right now in John 17, everything Jesus could have prayed for to the Father, man, he could have prayed anything. He kind of almost had like, it was almost like with Esther, it's like, ask anything of me. Like he's about to lay his life down. He's about to go to the cross. He's about to win back the power. He's about to go through the highest pain of human history ever. And he asks of the Father, like, Father, I want them to be with me and I with them, that they would know me and I would know them. What? Like, what is like valuable to him? You know, like that he could ask the Father of anything, and he asks him that just that we would know him, that we would know his love, and we would be in unity. And I think when we read that, I'm like, yeah, I have to give you everything. Like, you are just way too good for me to spend my life doing anything else. Like, this is what you wanted. Like, I want to give you what you desired after. And I want to spend my life, like, I want to give you things that are worth something to you, that move your heart. Like my worship, I want it to not be for people around me. I don't want it to be for the wrong intentions. I want to give you it because I want to move your heart and minister to you. I'll finish this off in point D. God is incorruptible. He does things to perfection of his character and his promises. He does them out of love, compassion, and mercy. He doesn't fold to cater to us, but he flings open the door and the way for us to come and know him as he is. I remember one time, a few weeks ago, I had coffee with one of my friends that I used to go to church with. And as I was telling her kind of what I do, she asked me this question. She's like, well, if we're going to know him in eternity, what's the point of spending this lifetime knowing him? Like, if you still won't know him fully, and if you still and if we still spend eternity with him, like, what's the point of spending it now? Because he's worthy of it. He's worth having our adoration and our beauty. And again, the cycle begins with him, because it's not what I can gain out of it. And what I give him is not because of what I can grab out of it and like spend my life with. He's worthy of having our hearts as his inheritance. And I think the more we like stay and spend time with like who he is, what he's done, I'm like, yeah, I'll give that to you. I'll give you my life, and that'll be worth it. It's just for you to have lovers. If just for you to have people that just make eye contact with you and spend time with you, I'll give you that. Even if it's super imperfect and like messed up and I'm like in unbelief like once a month, like I'll give you what I have, and somehow that moves your heart. Somehow that's what captivates you and ministers to your heart. I was gonna say something else, but I forgot. Anyways, okay, but yeah. So the Lord is incorruptible. Like what I was sharing earlier, he can't be manipulated, right? And I think I'll end it with this. The coolest thing about spending time with him more and more and more is realizing I wouldn't want to be God. The more I sit with Jesus, the more I realize you take that job. You're perfect. You do things to your mercy and your forgiveness and your compassion to perfection. And the more I'll sit with it and like see you work, the more it's like so much easier to give up control, because I'm like, I could never do what you do. I get irritated by someone accusing me like once a year. I'm like, oh my God, like I'm falling apart. God sits in accusation all the time, and he remains patient and kind and loving, and he still wants those people that are screaming angrily at him. And he just waits, and he doesn't cater to people's like unbelief and accusation. He doesn't change the whole structure of the world, in that he's incorruptible. He's just this perfect ruler and king. And the more I sit with him, the more I'm like, you're perfect and I'm not. I would never want this job anyway. And from that place, I'll like wrap it all up, is from that place, when you do things I don't understand, I want to cling to your goodness, and I want to cling to who you are, and all the things you've said and all the things I've seen, and just like hold on to it, especially in times when you're silent. I'll go back to my testimony. I'll go back to like how he said, like, we'll overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. I'll cling to what you've done, and even his love, it's not corruptible. Everything he does is out of love, and it's not for any like alternative purpose except for to further love. So he's not loving me so what he can gain out of me. He loves just to love, and the more he loves is all more. And it's like his love is just so incorruptible. It won't have hidden agendas, and it won't have anything like blotting it out. And all in all, I'm like, that's the kind of God I want to spend my life with. Everything that you are, just like re-sign me up kind of thing. I'll spend my life with you because you're so worth it. Let me end this, and then bye everyone. And then we'll pray.